You're muted, Grant. Hello, everybody.
Oh my gosh, I was doing all
Bad
that
captain.
talking.
Bad captain.
Oh, the captain.
I remembered everything except for the mute button.
You are no Saru, sir. You are no Saru.
What I was trying to say was stardate 203445677. I feel like Mariah made up that stardate.
I
That
did.
doesn't sound legit. Welcome everyone to Star Trek Discovery Pod, a kind of smart, kind of funny podcast about a new Star Trek and beyond. I'm your reluctant lieutenant at the helm for the night, Grant Davis. And with me on the view screen are
Mariah Gossett.
Clyde Haynes.
You're muted now, Mike.
And Mike Garcia.
Mike was our captain on an away mission, taking a nice milk bath on the Trill planet, but he put on a robe and shot back up to the ship. So you're joining us again. Welcome.
Yeah, I almost didn't make it. I was having too much fun in that Playboy grotto.
Ew. I wonder how clean that bath is. Oh,
You're just
Not
hanging out
very.
with the symbiotes, just chilling.
Yeah.
Some
You
of
want to
these-
hear more about it? I can go on.
The
some of
robes
these
were
skin
nice. Though.
cells.
I'll tell you. Did you bring me back a robe, Mike? Because I like the robes.
I mean, you have to wash it first, but yeah.
Mm.
Yuck. Point being, I was not going to make it tonight, but I was able to slide in. But Grant is our captain tonight.
Well, at least as far as the show notes are concerned, I'm captain. Tonight we're streaming the pod live over on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. And we're reviewing and breaking down Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 4, Forget Me Not. But before we could also call this Thanksgiving, right? It's
Yeah.
a Thanksgiving episode.
It's a very Thanksgiving episode.
Before we do that, Mariah, can you let everyone know how they can support this little podcast venture of ours?
Indeed. So if you are watching us live on YouTube, great. Hi, nice to see you. You can see our faces. If not, make sure you have subscribed to our audio version of this podcast. You can find links to all of those places at startrekpod.co. Also, if you do watch us live, we also appreciate it if you subscribe to the audio version of the podcast. That really helps us out so other people can find the show, and we would appreciate it. The other way you can support us is with your dollars. For $2 an episode, you can come hang out with us in Slack. There's watch-alongs happening all week. There's lots of things to distract you from the hellhole that is this planet right now. So you should check out our Slack channels. It's a really great community. I love hanging out with everyone in there and talking Trek. And we also do some special podcast episodes. And so don't pull up any maps. I'm tired of maps.
Look away for a minute, Mike.
No more maps, Mike.
Nevada, what's up? You listening?
Nevada, get it together.
George is so close.
Anyway, but you can join us over on Slack, $2 an episode. We also do some special Patreon episodes. I know we are going to talk some more about Trill history and lore over on the Patreon, so you should definitely subscribe. That's patreon.com/Star Trek Pod.
Clyde, where can people find us to chat on this?
Well, you know,
what a segue. That's awful.
I don't know what you're doing, but I'm gonna clean it up for you there. If you are watching us live on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you're watching us live, and you want to participate in our conversation, you want to ask us a question, you want to make a comment that you want us to read, if you type capital P, capital O, capital D, capital pod in the chat, that'll help us out to see your comment, and hopefully we'll read it on the show.
Yeah.
We love seeing the feedback.
All
All right. You guys ready to dive into the cave of Makala? I don't know what
Sure.
it was. Anyway,
I'm
we're
going to
going to
keep
break
letting
down.
you try.
Your name is Kamala, Grant.
We are off to a banging start.
Hell of a start, y'all.
All right, let's talk about Forget Me Not, which obviously I can't even remember. The episode was written by Alan McElroy and Chris Silvestri and Anthony Marinville. Is directed by Hanel M. Culpepper. And it's what?
Who did the first 3 episodes of Picard?
Ah, okay. Well, this is the episode where the computer is into silent film. Saru has a very traditional Thanksgiving, and Adira connects with their squid. So this is Star Trek Discovery Pod. We don't give you guys hot takes. We give you hot freaks.
Hot breaks. I did it.
I didn't prompt it. I was like, who's gonna do it? Someone's gonna step up and do it.
I was gonna do it, but I was like, I just showed up. They probably have this worked out.
I'm
Nope.
not really a
I
hot
trust
Franks.
the process.
This
It's
is
Yeah.
not
what
really my
happens
thing.
when the captain leaves the crew in charge of the bridge.
That's what
I like
happens.
that Mariah did it to the tune of Dayo.
Did you watch Beetlejuice recently, Mariah?
No, it just lives in my head rent free, so it's okay.
Word.
So, any takers for who wants to kick off their hot freaks on this?
I do.
Go
go.
for it.
All right. I have a quick hot freak. I just watched this so I could jump on the pod, but I thought this was a wonderful episode. It was an episode that I needed right now. I think many of us in the US are like going through this very tense moment, obviously, and we've all been going through such collective loss and anxiety and fear of the unknown and going forward. And this episode of Star Trek just magically appeared to speak to all of these things so many of us have been feeling. We see the crew struggling with this collective sense of deep loss and fear and displacement that is starting to bubble to the surface in almost violent ways, as we saw with the pilot, Kayla. Yeah.
You know her name.
And we saw all that with the Discovery crew, and we see this very, very beautiful character-based story with Adira, in which she's being forced to confront like the biggest feelings of loss in her life in order to move on and become a new person. Like, I think it was Colber who opened this episode with a medical officer's log, which I loved. Colbert later told Saru that talked about this idea of this personal progression, this metamorphosis someone can go through after dealing with and processing trauma, that can be very real. And that's something I think a lot of people have experienced. I've experienced it over the past few years, actually. And we saw a really lovely literal interpretation of that idea with Adira's story, which just hit me where it counts. And I loved going back to the Trill planet. Reminds me of Jadzia Dax, one of my favorite Star Trek characters. I absolutely love Adira, and I find the character so charming. Blue Del Barrio is a star. I think this person is just magnetic, and I'm so happy that they're part of our Discovery crew going forward. When the Trills were like, "Hey, stay here. We can show you what's up with your new Trillness," and Adira's like, "No. I'm going to stay on Discovery." I was like, "Yeah, you are. Please stay on Discovery. I want to follow you. I hope you're in season 4. I hope the show goes till season 7 and you stay with the show." I'm really into this character. I think, some of the storylines, some of the way this was executed was a little simplistic, but I think that was appropriate. A lot of it rested on the charm of the cast and just the vibe of these characters hanging out and us hanging out with them and them dealing with their shit. And I think it's pretty remarkable to see Star Trek stop for a minute and acknowledge that they have to take some time to recollect and deal with some really difficult personal feelings. That's my quick hot take. I really enjoyed it.
I'll jump in there and say I enjoyed it as well. And I think that's saying something, because when you look at this episode, it is an episode that is driven by the medical officer on the ship. And largely, I gotta be honest, Deanna Troi included, episodes that center and are driven around the medical personnel, particularly the doctors and counselors on Star Trek, aren't usually like my favorite episode. But this one made so much sense, and I thought was executed so well that I didn't mind that we weren't in a space battle or we weren't doing a first contact or something, incredible like that. It wasn't a space Western. This was like a space therapy episode, and I was all for it. And like you, Mike, you know what I wasn't expecting? I wasn't expecting to tear up during an episode of Star Trek. That I wasn't expecting. But there I was, because the emotional content, whether it was, Kayla Detmer coming to terms with the fact that she wasn't okay, and how much it takes to be able to say I'm not okay, right? If it wasn't the family dinner that we've all been to that ended the way we've all ended a family dinner, if it was, Michael and Adira and that relationship, the interplay between that, and I thought that, Culber was the right person to narrate and navigate us through that. And I just thought it was done so well that it felt like it fit. Like it wasn't this bottle episode that could go anywhere. It connected to the story that they've been through this traumatic experience, and they weren't okay as a group. Like physically, they all looked okay, but they weren't okay. And I look at my life and realize that there are times, even currently, where I'm going through trauma and I don't even know. And as a result, you're looking and you're going, well, physically I'm fine and I must be fine. And you get up and you go to work the next day and you do all the things that you were doing, but it just seems a little bit off. And how we deal with that trauma is super important. It's, Mike, to your point, especially at a time like this when it feels like we've all been, transported 930 years into the future where you can't go outside because the air's on fire. That trauma of losing your freedom, losing all these things, your innocence, right? When you look at the country that we live in, this I just thought was a great episode, both internally to the show and externally to the environment.
Yeah, I agree with everything y'all have said, and I think what an important message this episode takes. I mean, there's a lot of important things throughout this episode. I cried a lot on first watch throughout this, just like a lot. And I still teared up on the second watch through, and the concept that you have to face your trauma in order to move forward, I think, is the message that so many people need to hear right now. Like, you can't just overshadow and sweep under the rug everything that's wrong, because when you do that, you end up with this that we live in right now. And so I really thought this episode resonated so appropriately with the right now. I also thought Ian Alexander and Blue DeBario just like knocked it out of the park for such, fresh young faces in entertainment, that they're really being, and I know Ian Alexander was in the OA, which I think is, I haven't watched all of, but is another very beloved series. And so they're making very smart choices with their projects, but their relationship just felt so real to me on screen that I loved it so much. And I do have, my nits to pick about a few things specifically surrounding that, but overall, I was really impressed with this episode. Me, I'm the person who's like, where's the therapist on the ship? And Culber's like, okay, we might not have one, but I'm going to figure this out as best as I can. And watching Wilson Cruz just so gracefully take us through this full episode with his charm and with, the compassion that you can really feel that he has for this, his character, for this crew, but I also think for this actor and this cast. I saw during anyway, we'll get to it, but I really love this episode. I know we've been rambling a lot on the hot freaky section here.
I set the tone.
I love I think the Trills are so cool. I love that they hold on to all of this past knowledge and information. I think this episode while it felt like, again, we sort of completed the plot by the end of this episode, it sprinkled in enough little seeds that I think are going to grow for the rest of the season, that it is one of my probably one of my favorite episodes of the season thus far. I loved it.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on that, echoing everyone's sentiment. I think that I came down pretty hard on last week's episode, wasn't really feeling it. And while I thought there was a lot of positivity in last week's episode, it came across a bit saccharine, a bit corny to me. Whereas this one also offered quite a bit of positivity, of optimism in dealing with some heavy subject matter, and did it in such a beautiful way. This was a powerful episode. I love how they dealt with loss and grief, and this idea of the importance of connections and protecting others and looking out for them. These themes, how they kind of echoed throughout the episode through various different facets, was just so masterfully executed. And I think I saw some comment from someone just up here that was talking about how the special effects were all effectively done in someone's spare bedroom over the garage, which in part is kind of true, right? P.W. Gregory points that out. And the special effects on this were fantastic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We talked in the first two seasons a lot about how Trek explored duality in a lot of the characters, whether it's Ash Tyler also being Vok, or Burnham being from two worlds, or the mirror verse versus the regular verse of a person, and how you kind of navigate your identity there. But this episode kind of expands upon that with not just duality, but just overall identity, figuring out who you are, and that not just being a thing you check off on a list, but it's a process of development and discovery.
What?
Right. A little bit corny there. Anyway, that's all to just say my hot freak is I loved this episode. I thought this was super powerful, and this is excellence in character development.
Wow. All four of us love this episode.
It worked for us.
A home run out of the universe.
Well, do you guys want to start? I see that Mariah's first note was Dr. Colbert is running scans on all the staff and everyone's stressed out.
Yes, I wrote that down because I also wanted to remember to note. So the little like scanner that he's using is based off of the original series and the scanner that Bones would use. So I thought that was like a fun little Easter egg that they threw in there. But I also liked that moment because we sort of got this individual check-in, you know, using Colbert as our guide through the ship to sort of see how everyone is managing their stress, which I thought was interesting to see. You know, some of them are working out, and then we have Burnham, who's sort of got this like, you know, when you're in front of the cork board with all of the things pinned up and all the lines leading to all that, she had like the digital version of that.
She's gone crazy. Yeah.
Of her theory board, like in her room. You know, and she's sort of hoarding things. And anyway, I just thought it was like fun to sort of see how everyone's managing this. And you see Saru trying to be overly logical, and like when the computer is like, yoga, meditation, medication, less dairy. And I was like, way to read me, computer. Why do you have to drag me like that?
Therapeutic coloring books.
Yes.
You know, I love that moment. And I was thinking, how many of these do I need?
Right.
And the therapeutic coloring book, I was like, hello, Amazon, because I need some of this stuff in my life. The no dairy, I don't know. I'm ready to go there.
My body is ready for me to stop saying yes to dairy, but but then we get this little sort of seed planted there where the computer sort of blinks and we see the sphere for a moment, and we get Zora's voice, right?
Yeah.
From Calypso.
From the short trek, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the sphere is taking over. I think there was, you know, we were theorizing a couple episodes back that, is Control gonna kind of pop back in? But no, it's actually the sphere, which they are protecting from Control, which fuses in with the ship. And yeah, like you were saying, that was kind of predicted and projected in Andromeda or Calypso.
Calypso, yeah. I love the idea that the spear data is protecting Discovery, even to the point of suggesting great fun movies for them to watch at the end.
I thought it was nefarious at first. Did you guys?
Yeah, I was a little worried at first, but
I was,
because of
yeah.
how like this image pops in and he doesn't see what's going on in the background, and then all of a sudden the voice kind of gets warbled, and it seems like it's trying to reconfigure how it's suggesting things in almost a manipulative way. I was like, oh no.
It's almost as if the show was banking on us remembering Calypso and recognizing the voice that we have positive connotations with. So we wouldn't be, assigning a negative value to this change in the computer voice and tone. Because that's where I went instantly. I was like, oh, this is the voice from Calypso. This is the spear data. The spear data exists in Discovery. Okay, this is all good. It's weird, but it's good. And the fact that Saru didn't immediately freak out when this was happening. He just kind of slowly processed it, and it seemed like he was cool what was going on. I was like, has the computer spoken to him like this before? But you find that at the end, that's just who Saru is. He's not, he's not going to fly off the rails in a moment like that. He's going to quietly process and be patient before he acts. And we've seen this before from Saru, right?
Once you drop your ganglia, you just light up a blunt and you just
that's it.
Still, man. You just mellow.
I mean,
he's
got a ton of plants in his ready room. I'm really hoping his
hydroponics
ready room,
going.
like event, how his quarters looked last season, and like I really want his ready room just to slowly be taken over by plants. Like he is that plant person on Instagram where every time you look at one of their photos, you're like, did they get another one? What is happening here?
Black light in the background, big Bob Marley poster.
They're hanging out.
Look, I was worried. I think if I had to pick a nit, it would be that this voice of the computer wasn't as clean and crisp for your viewer who may not have seen the short track.
I thought it was intentional. I thought you're not supposed to really know until Saru at the end clarifies.
Yeah,
I've seen that short track 100 times. It's like my favorite one.
It's mine too, but I'm thinking of the person who didn't. The person who just watches this week to week, and they're like, what's going on? Because there wasn't really a big bad in this episode, right? You had this one Trill guy who was upset for like 2 minutes before the next thing you know, he's helping.
He was about to kill him, I think, right?
He was, and that lasted, about as long as it took Burnham to punch him in the face. And then the next thing you know, he's like, okay, I'll help. Like, outside of him, I was almost expecting, and I think because we've been talking about Control and we're kind of expecting something nefarious, something surprising to happen, the voice of the computer, like I knew it was Zora, but I was like, well, is there something else here too?
Yeah, I guess I had a hint of that. Maybe this is bad, but I don't know. It kind of felt like this season, Discovery has been feeling like the writing really wants to get to that resolution really quickly. Like it's not getting too complicated. It's not getting too deep or tricksy. You can kind of feel where it's going. I think
they're not trying to dangle too many threads and confuse us. Right.
Yeah. It's just kind of like let's just go along for the ride, and the stories feel more familiar. So I kind of felt like, okay, this is going to end up in a good place.
Well, among the list of protectors that they really kind of highlight on this particular episode, you of course have the ship now, which is personified, and it's looking after the crew. You see that Saru is doing his best to care for the well-being, him as leader, as well as Culber as the new transitional therapist, that kind of taking on that extra hat. Adira is along with her, she's trying to look out for both her squid and the Trill legacy and the crew. Like she says that interesting thing to Burnham of I have two things, the two stipulations, and one of them is I don't want to let anyone down, which Burnham quickly says you won't. Reassures her, which is great. but Adira, it's letting anyone down. Is it letting down her legacy and the squid as well? That's kind of what I was wondering. But the squid is also protecting Adira's heart. And so it's just like all this idea of like everyone needs to look out for each other, especially in these fragile moments, seem to be emphasized without coming across heavy-handed in this episode. Hint, hint, last episode. And I just thought it was really well done.
It felt graceful in this episode. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of squids, is that a term we've heard before?
For the Trills, I believe in
Yeah.
DS9 and maybe in TNG, they've been referred to as worms. But squid's fine.
It seemed to be Adira's personal
nickname.
Right, because we did find out that she basically was suffering from a pretty deep form of amnesia. She didn't know how she got the Trill symbiote. So she obviously didn't have the proper terminology for it. She just seemed to wake up a year ago with a symbiote in her, because she was really repressing this horrible memory that we saw her face in this episode.
So let's talk more about that in particular then, what Adira sees in the bathtub, and that somehow Michael Burnham's able to just kind of drop in and eavesdrop on. I don't know how these little milk bath things work, but that seemed a little wonky to me.
It seems like it's sort of like a portal into some sort of like subspace sort of situation is what I read it as. I was like, there's some visuals though that looked like she was going into the sunken place for a second. And I was like, oh, no. Like,
it was like a Winamp visual. I was like, whoa.
What's going on?
Saru's blunt room.
But yeah, I liked the way they visualized it though, because it didn't feel, it was a little mysterious, but to me it didn't come off as being scary. It felt like a space that wanted to, get a message across. And so like having like the ceiling sort of react to anything that is hurting Adira, and then these little, almost they reminded me of like when a seedling starts to grow, like the very first little pieces of a plant that are coming up out of the soil, especially when they were like connecting to her fingers and made those cute little noises. It was like all of the I thought they did a good job with the sound effects and the visuals of trying to be like, hey, this isn't a bad place, right? Like this is a place of discovery. It's a place to sort of process this traumatic event. And then we go through Adira's memories, and essentially they have to get past the traumatic event of receiving this symbiote and losing their partner in the process, which I have a lot of questions about the loss of Gray. I'm just like, are we still in the 32nd century not able to fix basic flesh wounds? Like this seemed very similar to what happened to Stamets, right? Like it's something like if they have the technology to fix Stamets, why don't we have the technology to fix Gray? I understand it from like a plot reasoning, blah blah blah, but because
of the burn. The burn got rid of all the healing.
But this was, I actually started, on my second watch, I listened to what the little robots said, and they said medical protocol dictates that this patient cannot be saved. And so to me, that says there's something very interesting going on with the way these medical robots are being programmed, right? Is it because of a lack of resources? Is it because they only spend a specific amount of time fixing people? Are they programmed to have, are there species that they will take care of over others? There's all of these sort of possibilities there.
Is there slightly a parasitic nature to the Trill symbiote that like takes away from the ability to heal yourself? Like,
I mean, maybe. I don't think there is anything about like the host and the Trill like making it harder for you to heal somebody, but in lore of Trill that I know of. But I thought it was interesting to me because like even right now, currently there are like laws trying to be enacted to essentially say doctors can refuse to serve people if their religious beliefs don't allow them to serve specifically queer and trans people. And so I was like, oh, well, that would maybe be an interesting storyline for Trek to say, like, oh, because we don't have enough trained medical personnel, we now have these medical robots, but the medical robots kind of have this algorithm that decides who gets to live and who gets to die, which I think would be a very interesting plotline to explore. And so that's what I'm hoping they did, because that would be way more interesting than Gray died because a pointy thing went into their stomach.
Yeah, there's definitely a thread there that the show can weave into something deeper and more interesting and kind of dark. If we think about it, to me, it just felt like, again, like the show this season is just wants to get to that resolution, and it just kind of very simply says, oh, we need this character to die because we're moving the story along for story reasons. Don't think about it too much. Like Clyde, I remember, I think it was the first episode of this season, I compared Discovery, the season of Discovery, to Stargate Atlantis, which is a very light and poppy show. You kind of always knew where it was going. It was really simple, but it was also, and very earnest, but it was also, it was a great hangout show. The characters banter, and they were all just great to hang out with, but it wasn't super deep, and it didn't have this air of trying to be a prestige drama like Disco season 1 and season 2 did. And I think that's kind of where we are with Disco. I think we're just kind of, they're still trying to do some complicated stuff, but overall, it feels a lot lighter and simpler this season, even though we're dealing with some big, heavy issues.
Mike, I liked Star Trek or Stargate Atlantis. So I was worried about where you were going with that there for a moment.
No, I like that show. Yeah.
No, but I think you're right. Is that, for me, when I look at a show, I'm trying to figure out, has it found its voice? Is it changing its voice? Does that make any sense? And I think Star Trek Discovery is really looking to create this voice that is a little bit lighter than it's been in previous years. And it does give me more of a TNG feel, where there are these weekly events that they're dealing with, kind of on this mission to explore and to find the Federation headquarters. They're also doing these, they're making the universe a better place each week. And so I think I'm on board for that, because I think, especially when I look at Discovery season 1, it was, a bunch of cut up episodes of one kick-ass movie, right? And it had that pacing to it, where it was a little bit darker, and you've got Klingons and you've got Vok, and I'm Vok, but I'm actually Ash Tyler. This is more like a Star Trek series that's interesting. And I'm fascinated to see how it holds up in light of our new ways of storytelling that are vastly different from the 1990s.
Jumping back to the relationship between Adira and Gray, I thought there was such a lean efficiency to how the writers and directors, I guess everyone, were able to tell that story and get across this really deep emotional connection. It was very very effective for me, and I think they only showed like 2 scenes between the 2 characters, like the one where Gray's about to get the symbiote, and then the scene where the cello, the quilt, and then the accident. And just in those 2, I really bought into it. I thought they are soulmates. They have this deep connection, and this is a genuine traumatic loss for Adira that has caused this amnesia of other events, and being able to overcome that will unlock the floodgates. Like it all worked really well for me, which is why I think it made sense that they needed to be able to thread together all of those scenes and have a little bit of revelation of who Adira is in a relationship, how thoughtful Adira can be in making the quilt and being artistic and being humble, but giving and kind and sweet. And then losing all of that in that instant and being able to step up and have the courage to boldly go and take on a symbiote, you know?
Yeah.
It all was just written with such efficiency that I guess I think it's really interesting, Mariah, what you're saying, like this idea that they also have that opportunity to go in that route and navigate that kind of storyline. But, you know, for the time that they had, I think it made sense for them to go that way. And it was really impressive that they were able to kind of thread it that easily. I don't know. I was just really blown away.
You're speaking my mind, because when I first watched the depiction of their relationship, and we just lost Clyde off the screen. Hopefully he comes back in a minute. When I first watched the depiction of this relationship, I felt, well, this feels pretty simplistic, but it was so deep and emotionally resonant. And it felt just so warm and real and authentic. And it really did a lot of character development for this character that we're going to be following with the Discovery, our newest crew member. So you know that she is kind-hearted, funny, smart, loving, but she's also extremely brave. And those are all that. The fact that she is connected to the Federation in this future version of Trek, that is just perfect, because that's who I want the Federation to be. That's what I want Starfleet to be. And I think Adira embodies all those traits. She's also very grounded, very unpretentious. You know, that's just Star Trek. That's just the Federation. That's Starfleet to me.
Yeah. And I thought, I mean, I commend the writers for, I think, some of the most natural dialogue I've heard for like young relationship characters. Like it felt very grounded in reality to me. Like the little quippiness of the like, you know, there were some pieces of dialogue that felt very nuanced and meaningful. Like, of course, it's still me. I'm just more me. You know, like that to me felt very important, especially to hear like a, you know, a trans actor playing a trans character being able to say those words of kind of speaking like, I am the most me I've ever been. You know, once you are this complete person, once you get to be your complete and full authentic self. And then, you know, the like funnier side of like, well, of course I'm perfect, you know, like these funny little quips there. And then the compliments to Adira. And then that quilt is the gayest gift I've ever seen. And I loved it so much. It was like cottage core, like crafty queers to the max. And I loved it. And like, I thought it was such a cute way to be able to show the span of their relationship and all of these memories that they built in like a creative way, instead of like someone being like, oh, remember that time we did this silly thing with the replicators? It was like, oh, we're going to show you that there's small moments that are meaningful as well as these bigger moments, right?
Yeah.
And that is a true relationship, is there's these small, stupid moments that you remember, and then there's the big things, of course. And so I thought it was really great. And then, of course, you could like read into the longer metaphor of the quilt and its representation within the queer community as well, of what a quilt represents there. But I thought it was cute and I loved it. And I thought their interactions together were so great. And I'm excited that we get to see more of them together with this sort of visual representation we have of Gray, which is new and unique. And so I guess we'll see what that looks like, because it's now a human, you know, hosting a symbiote for the first time. And then, yeah, I think that's what the end of my thought process there. Were you going to say something, Grant?
Well, no, I just wanted to jump over and talk also about the Thanksgiving scene, because it seems pretty significant.
Yeah.
The idea that Saru was, I think our first scene of Saru trying to get a good assessment of the crew is when he first walks in on Stamets, and he's checking on Stamets and asking him like, "Hey, how are you doing? How have you been? I recognize what you just went through." And there's a calculated captain of the ship angle to what he's asking, because he's also concerned, like, you are a valuable asset besides your personal well-being, but he's also checking on his well-being. Like, you are the person who can transport us anywhere in the galaxy, and if dilithium, is that what it's called, is such a rare commodity, we need you, and we need a better way to kind of jump through the mycelial network. So I thought him kind of checking in there was a great introduction to, like, Saru cares about his people. He wants to follow up. He wants to see how they're doing. He's also considerate about the larger picture of the situation they're in, and he's just trying to work things out. But it wasn't until like his exchange with Culber that it kind of really solidified, like, there's bigger problems at stake. And I love Culber in this episode and how he helped steer the ship essentially, but then at the Thanksgiving was kind of hands off.
Well, that's the perfect way to be, is I'm going to plant the seed of an idea, but I'm going to have no responsibility in the execution. And I think Saru had all of the right pieces to the puzzle, but again, like any family, when everyone is stressed out and you're trying to force fun time, it's never going to work super well. I think they all needed to just air their grievances, and it was just unfortunate for Saru to have planned the perfect opportunity for all of those grievances to be aired.
Definitely cathartic, I think. Rather than it just being this kind of kumbaya moment of them being like, I'm thankful for this round table, like an awful 90s TNG episode. This is me making an assumption. I think
watch it.
I think the fact that it just kind of broke into this snarky fight with all these underlying insecurities of all of them. It was perfect.
I want to go back to something Mike used to say about Lower Decks, right? Mike used to call Lower Decks an office comedy, right? A workplace comedy.
Yeah.
Well, I think about when we look at that scene, if you've ever been part of like a dysfunctional work team where you all had these complaints, but nobody was talking about them, then the big Thanksgiving feast was perfect if you're trying to trying to work some of that stuff out. Because here we are, we're sitting and everybody is, they're kind of grumpy and they're stressed and they're having all of these feelings, but no one's talking about them. No one's interacting. And so it's not even that you just brought them to the surface. In a way, you allowed the individuals to confront what was going on and then deal with it. And they were able to deal with it, and not in a completely holistic, I'm healed way, but almost in a first step, I am acknowledging that there's something going on here. And it was done through usually Stamets and a lot of people, but through the crew as a whole, and even in some sense between the ship and the crew. Right. And so I thought that it really worked for me. I wasn't sure where it was going to go or how I felt, especially I was most excited about the big buffet that
Georgia was digging into.
Oh yeah, she liked that wine. Well, I mean, in part because, first of all,
wait a second. So
no,
Giorgio and Linus.
Yes,
something's happening there.
They're friends.
Something is going on. They're sharing popcorn.
Yeah.
Their glances across the table at each other.
I mean, I will say this. I thought about this, right? I was like, as much as I want to believe they're just friends, I had to run it through my "are they just friends" filter.
It's Giorgio,
right? And I know, she's down with anything. She used to eat kelpian, so I had to ask myself, if I went to the movies with Mike, right? Would one of us give popcorn to each other the way Linus gave her popcorn. And I had to say no. Like that
I
felt a
would
little
offer
extra.
you popcorn and not an asshole.
No, I'm saying,
I
but
would
it's
give
like,
you be like, hey, do you want some popcorn? But this
Right.
was the like,
I would expect you
Right.
to have like 2 buckets of popcorn and be like, hey, you know, I got you some popcorn. But that was like, hey, you want some popcorn, Schnookums?
because
And
you're
then it
gonna
was like,
pop my corn later.
okay, see, I wasn't going there, but you know, whatever floats your starship.
I'm sorry. I interrupted your nice thoughts about this dinner, Clyde, with my shipping of Giorgio and Linus. But
I just hope Snookums doesn't last up until the whatever century they're in.
I do like that we're getting this running thread of Giorgio and Linus, because we were kind of introduced to Linus as a character in season 2, and he's kind of in the background. He's sneezing, he has a cold. Every now and then he's hanging out with the bridge crew, and he was always just such a visually interesting character and kind of a comic relief character, but didn't really
Oculus range.
didn't really have much personality. And it feels like the show doesn't really know what to do with Giorgio right now. So to kind
Or
of
Linus.
so to kind of combine those two characters and have them just be kind of a running gag in the background, you know, that's probably a good idea for now.
She was great snarky commentary during all the bickering at Thanksgiving too.
And her walking away with the bottle of wine as she's leaving.
Right.
Great detail.
Oh,
Yeah, but-
Mom.
I think you're right though, Mike. They really have no idea, at least at this point, what to do with Giorgio, right? She's not. It's like she doesn't have a role in the crew.
She's just treading water. She'll go on the attack soon enough. I mean, I thought her little scene in the first episode was great, or the second episode, I guess, where she saves Saru in the bar fight. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm assuming once they get to this sort of much more, I mean, spoiler alert if you didn't watch the coming up next little preview, but the uniforms specifically on what I'm assuming at this point is the Federation admirals that they're going to go talk to look much more militaristic. And so I'm going to be very interested to see and then like what her role, you know, because they could be looking for someone that has the ideals and wrath of a Giorgio.
I used to be an empress of the galaxy. No big.
I also like that they continue to call her Emperor Giorgio. Like they're so into titles.
So Detmer had to nerdy ass Star Trek. Of course, they have
haikus, baby.
A haiku off.
Yes.
Oh, it's a haiku off.
Hey, I loved it. I thought it was
Going around
great.
the table, I was like, oh, I would start a fight with someone to get out of this too. But when Detmer goes into hers, her performance was awesome to me. Like it was so
it was
creepy and unhinged about how she can't stop talking about Stamets bleeding everywhere and then giggling about it. And she's like, no, wait, I gotta frame this properly. And Stamets is like, dude, what the fuck?
Yeah, there was a really like unnerving horror element to it.
Yeah, when
that really worked. My emotions were all over the place during her breakdown because I was like, what is happening? I was confused, I was frightened, I was scared, and then I was worried for her.
Yeah, it's like a perfect psychological kind of break that's happening there. And she depicted that so well.
Yeah, definitely.
And that being the catalyst for like everyone kind of snarking at each other about like feeling undervalued when, you know, they're all at their most fragile right now, having lost everyone, lost their past and all their other kind of connections there. Only for it to kind of come up in this kind of childish one-upsmanship that could have felt fake and forced, but I thought it was very believable, at least for me. I bought into it.
I liked the little kind of go around the table. Also, I saw someone post on Twitter or maybe in our Slack that I definitely need the short trek of Tilly throwing up on the ambassador.
Tilly's being like, when Saru's like, man, I'm sorry about this whole dinner thing. She's like, dude, this is like every Thanksgiving of my family. Yeah, this
This is
Tuesday.
Tuesday in my family. I love that.
It was another little window into Tilly, and also a great way to just kind of alleviate like all that kind of tension that was among everyone.
I thought this was a great vehicle for Tilly in particular. We got to see some range, right? We got to see shy Tilly. We got to see a more outspoken Tilly. We got to see angry Tilly.
And she curses when she's angry.
Yes, she does. And so the idea of her working with Stamets on a solution is interesting. Though I just keep thinking of at what point does Zora get stuck out there by herself and what happens. But
yeah, I liked the interactions between Stamets and Tilly in this episode because you can tell, you know, for someone who work is like the ultimate pride, I think Stamets has a hard time coming to terms with I need help. I mean, that, like you said before, Grant, like everyone in this episode is having to sort of accept that they need help from other people in order to succeed. And it's beyond them knowing, like, of course we need the whole crew to succeed. It's like, oh, I'm going to have to lean on these people for things I didn't even think I was going to need to lean on them for. And so, you know, I was like, ooh, Stamets is in a mood at the beginning of the episode when they have that sort of chat with Saru, because I think he's just like, if I'm not needed to function as this portion of the ship, what is then my place on this ship after that? Which becomes that sort of ego trip, I think, which is interesting there. You know, and then Tilly is trying to push her confidence forward in the area she is the most confident, math and science, right? She's like, this is my shit. I'm ready to go for it. And then she just immediately gets shot down. So it was nice to see the two of them kind of come full circle towards the end when Stamets finally is the like, I'm sorry, I was being a jerk. Like, I know I can be a jerk sometimes. Please forgive me. And they sort of move forward from there. And so I'll be interested to see how they use little genius Adira plus Tilly to maybe create something pretty cool. So
the Stamets Tilly thread throughout this episode was a great microcosm of everything that we're seeing on the ship, because it started there with them early in the ship, early in the episode, and really what was going on there was all this loss and trauma and difficulty everybody's going through is just making the parts of everybody's personality that butts up against the part of someone else's personality, like, just more underlined, you know? So Stamets is worried that, like you said, maybe he has lost his place in this future where there's so much, he's lost 1,000 years of technological and scientific development. So plus maybe he's not the brightest.
He sacrificed his body, right? Like,
right.
He gave himself to this ship,
right,
to be a scientific experiment to save them so many times, only for Saru, and Saru didn't know any better, but Saru to come in and be like, find a different solution. You're being replaced, basically. Find your replacement. And it's like, I am this ship, and like part of his identity is completely entwined with it. And like, yeah, I get where he's coming from, that like he can't just quickly be like, oh, that's cool, let's go with your dark matter solution.
Yeah,
it was like the psychology of these characters and how they would interact, like you're saying, Mike, is very considered by the writers and creators of the show, and they're doing such a great job there.
Yeah, very much. Stamets is a man out of place, and his fears of being replaced by something or not being the brightest kid in the class anymore made him lash out at Tilly, whose reaction to being in this new era is, I'm gonna work as hard as I can because I'm super ambitious and figure out how to move forward and progress, and that's gonna butt right up against Stamets' fears and insecurities. And that is what happened with Kayla as well. The reason that her breakdown took the form of tossing shit Stamets' way is because she's been feeling these, as the pilot of the ship, who rarely gets any specific attention or accolades, even though she should. And for 3 seasons, she's been seeing all these accolades go to Stamets, and there's some resentment and aggression there. And with all this extra stuff that's being pushed on her and everyone around her, that rises to the top and it just explodes. And it felt earned and authentic.
Well, I also think that there's this added pressure of being kind of the last of humanity so far, right? Like, you talk about the pressure, like for Stamets, right now, there's no one else who can run this ship in the universe. Right?
I mean, but couldn't they just like spore up another person and plug them in?
Well, I'm assuming that.
Oh, we lost Clyde.
Oh, Clyde went off the stream.
Clyde is assuming they cannot, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm wondering if he's like assuming it's because like he has all of that data now sort of ingrained into his mind and DNA about how it all works. But I was like, they did it with a tardigrade, which is, a pretty simplistic being. So I don't know.
Yeah. I see some people in the chat are also talking about maybe Stamets going a little too far. I see Stamets has got to grow up, and Culber is a saint for putting up with Stamets. But at the same time, like I think he deserved to have that little lash out. That like they're all in a high stress situation. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah, there's like a lot of stress on everybody. I'm surprised it took this long for them all to have a couple of screaming matches at each other.
And compare the Stamets of this season to the Stamets of the first season, where he was bitchy to everyone. He was just like, get out of here. You don't talk to me. You're an idiot. I got too many things to deal with. To like, he's so much more chill and like willing to listen to people. And him lashing out at Tilly during this situation, I get it.
Yeah, but think about it though. Have you ever been in a situation with someone, whether it's your significant other, a relative, some friends, where you've been holding on to something for a little while? It doesn't have to be a long while, but just for a little while. And then you have that big fight, right? And maybe you're not a big yeller, but
kitchen sink.
But you kind of get all that stuff out. And even if it's not resolved in that moment,
it just feels better.
It feels better that it's out.
But then the guilt settles in, right? You're like, I didn't have to use that.
You got to go back and think about what you said and be like, wow.
And how you said it.
And how you said it, what fingers you used, and all that stuff.
Just what pillows you threw, what doors you slammed.
Exactly. But you do feel like at least it's out. And I feel as though that was a critical piece. And so I was all for it, watching them just kind of go nuts at each other, stand up for each other. It was interesting to see the interplay between relationships. The only thing I didn't quite get was why you had random people at the end just go, well, you know what?
I'm going to leave too.
Yeah, I haven't yelled at anybody and nobody's yelled at me, but I think I'll take my tray and go.
I think everyone was just like, well, now it's very awkward and we should all probably just leave.
Other people are leaving? Sweet.
I was with Georgia like, where's dessert?
Like, right?
You
like
all
there's dessert for
no
all
pie?
These people.
No pie? No cake?
Yeah.
She'll replicate that later.
Yeah, it's like, I have to hang out with Saru. Wine and I'm out of here.
So we all know.
Linus will bring the cake. Cake is eternal.
Patty cake.
Cake is eternal. I wanted to mention this comment by Choopy. She said, my first real cry moment of this episode was when all those hosts came out of the shadows and welcomed Adira. It was so warm and loving and beautiful, and somehow they made me feel like that was welcoming me. Yeah, that is beautifully put. I felt exactly the same way. It was a great earned moment. It was great to see the faces of all the host of Trill past, but that led us to Adira remembering the coordinates to Starfleet's home base. But when she handed the coordinates to Michael had a surprised, shocked look on her face.
I think it's Vulcan.
Do you think it's Vulcan? Yeah, they didn't tell us. Where are we going?
Oh, I didn't even
Mm.
think about
No,
like it
neither
being
did
a
I.
surprise place.
I was just thinking, it was surprise. Like, I don't know. It'll be cool to find out.
Deep
Yeah.
Space Nine. That's where we're going.
Yes.
Oh no, someone's excited.
I wanted to point out with the kind of jumping back really quick to the many hosts of the symbiote. So we saw there's a Picard era uniform. So that's our first actual crossover event we have here on Discovery with another kind of current Trek going on. There was some kind of what I'm assuming is more now-ish time frame uniforms, something from the DS9 TNG era, and then some other stuff I couldn't really place, but I thought that was kind of cool.
How are these symbiotes like generally transferred outside of a surgery robot? Do you have to throw it up into someone else's mouth?
It's just up the butt.
It's usually surgery, Grant.
Yeah.
And how does it? So it can the symbiote convinces you, hey, you're gonna die, but I need you to just go ahead and transfer me over to them, buddy. Thanks.
They're not dead. They're just different.
Well, no, when a host is
dies,
when a host is nearing their natural death,
yes,
if it can be prevented, that they just don't die. But if a host is dying, then there is a surgery that takes place, and the symbiont is transferred to a Trill that is selected by a committee on the planet Trill. Like they said in this episode, we got a lot of good Trill lore in this episode. Not every Trill gets a symbiont. There's only a small number of symbionts, and they can't all be paired with. All Trills cannot be paired with a symbiont.
Yeah, which apparently though, like I know that's what they said, but I would say according to there's a Deep Space Nine episode I thought that kind of talks about how this isn't actually true. It was they kind of made it up so that everyone wasn't arguing over who got to be a host or not.
There were gatekeepers in the Trill leadership that were apparently more Trills can be joined with symbionts that was initially thought.
So it'd be interesting to know, like if the lore has essentially just taken over and the people who know it's not real have all died off, like with the burn, and so that myth has just continued. And so like essentially Adira is the ultimate myth buster for them.
Yeah. I haven't seen these DS9 episodes in years, and I know you're rewatching, Mariah, and I'm glad you are. Thanks for bringing that up.
I mean, I definitely don't get the bigger back history of Trill, but I saw someone ask earlier in the comments whether or not I understood enough in this episode, and I felt I did. It seemed like they gave enough of an explanation in addition to the stuff you guys had already discussed. This isn't necessarily a foreign concept. I think I've seen this kind of shared hive mind concept be introduced in other sci-fi properties as well. So I got it.
Yeah.
Like a Firestorm.
Sorry,
Firestorm.
my ADD is like fully kicked in. But going back to your question of where's the Federation, I saw someone post it, and it would also be interesting if it was Kronos.
Lamo says
that would be
Kronos?
Very surprising.
Well, I think we talked about this a little bit last week. Discovery left the kind of the century where they had changed the relationship with the Klingons, at least kind of in secret. So to me, Kronos would be very interesting.
Especially if we want to get Mary Chieffo back on the show to play an ancestor of L'Rell, which
that would be dope.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Of course. Everyone who is currently watching us over on YouTube and I guess elsewhere as well, if you want to go ahead and put in your comments or questions for us, ask us anything you want. You can ask about why my hair looks this way or whatever. Go ahead and put
Grant
it
joined the Mighty Boss Tones today.
Yeah, I'm a new member. There's a lot of weird rules and stipulations. You can go ahead and type POD in your comment and go ahead and post it right now. And I wanted to talk about the 5 words real quick that are holding everyone together when we find the Federation. That's what I guess it was Colbert, right? Who said
Mhm.
like that's the only thing that's kind of holding everyone together. And I mean, we all know that we've already found the Federation, right? The Federation is our discovery crew.
Mm-hmm.
That's the answer. And it seems based off of, I didn't watch the preview, but based off of what Mariah is saying, that we're going to find this militaristic monstrosity that no longer reflects the initial Federation Starfleet ideals, potentially. Don't know. Haven't seen this episode. That those ideals are going to live on in Discovery, and what they can kind of proliferate into the rest of the galaxy. Especially like, at the end of this episode, we see that the Trill already are pledging their allegiance. They're like, hey, when you find the Federation, let us know. We're in there. We're going to join them.
So someone explained to me real quick, and this is about that. The Adira said she was on a generation ship or a generational ship that was a Federation ship. Am I right?
She said they were looking for the Federation. So it was essentially a bunch of people who believed that the Federation was still out there on a generation ship trying to find it.
So she wasn't necessarily a Federation member or a Starfleet member.
What's a generation ship?
It's like
generation ship. Remember we were reintroduced to that concept on an episode of Lower Decks. That's where the crew can stay in cryo for really long journeys, and then they can have
descendants
that take over the ship over hundreds of years.
What did you ask before that, Mike?
I'm so sorry. I keep doing that.
Okay.
I was actually talking, if we can get into slight spoilers of the preview for next week. You said the uniforms that the Starfleet admirals or whoever that they meet look a little militaristic, probably because they're gray. Yeah. To me, they just look like pajamas. Like
but they had more like stuff on the top, like banners and
it reminded me of my footsie pajamas. So I kind of hope Discovery, in my footsie pajamas when I was a child, of course. Not the ones I wear now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really hope Discovery doesn't adopt those uniforms.
I wouldn't want them either. And Takeko made an interesting point about one of the episodes in this season being called Unification, which has to do with the Romulans and the Vulcans. And so that could also be interesting and a very big surprise if the Romulans are also one of the bigger bases for the Federation. We didn't get to see a lot of, I'd have to watch more closely of the preview, like specifically looking for ears, I guess, to see what was going on, but I didn't outright see any. And I think they do that on purpose for the previews, not to give anything too crazy away. That they all typically just looked like humans.
It would be interesting based on Takako's comment here. We do have an episode coming up called Unification Part 3. There was Unification Part 1 and Part 2 on TNG, which was about trying to reunite the Vulcans and the Romulans, as you said. But the Discovery crew came from pre-Kirk era Trek. And in pre-Kirk era Trek, no one in the Federation knew what the Romulans looked like. There's an episode where the entire Enterprise crew is surprised to learn that someone who they meet and think is a Vulcan is actually a Romulan.
But do you think Burnham would know what a Romulan is from growing up on Vulcan?
Burnham might, yeah. And also the Spear data might have that as well. Like it might just be, if the Romulans are going to show up this season, it could just be just a one-liner where Burnham explains, oh yeah, they kind of look like bumpy four-headed Vulcans, or they just point to the Spear data and that clears it up.
I was doing some reading about like the Sphere data stuff, and so we do have to, while the Sphere has a ton of data and information, it does stop at the same point that Discovery sort of stopped in time, so it's not going to know anything really going farther into the future. It'll just know everything that existed from that time point back. And so I had a question for y'all. Do you find that silent film to be that funny that everyone was
No.
laughing that hard? That was
No.
like the one thing that was the most like
Yeah.
not believable to me. So if you were to show a film to people in the 32nd century that you needed them to laugh about, what do you think you would pick?
They would choose slapstick. I think maybe comedy's cyclical, and the idea is like when
Yeah.
you're in zero G space all the time, some things with heavy gravity and slapstick pratfalls is hilarious. I don't know. That was so weird.
I made a joke, but I think I was like, then I think Jackass would hold up in the 32nd century because it's just dumb stuff.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know. Super bad. Enjoy that, guys.
I think-
What's that going to do for you?
I think our enlightened Discovery crew would be like taken aback and grossed out by Jackass. Like, this is real.
No, 100%. Yeah.
Why would these people do this to themselves? How do we ever
Ooh.
survive?
The
I love
Addams
that
Family?
idea.
That's a good choice, P.W. Gregory. I do
Have
like
you
Addams Family.
have you guys never had like a friend or someone who just, their parents didn't let them watch movies or stuff growing up, and you try and introduce them to something like Goonies or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and some of those are hit and miss.
Mhm.
And so I think that you'd have to be like, you'd have to think about what's gonna hold up, right? Like my first thought was Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because I'm like, it's great, it's a classic. But if you don't have, if we've evolved to a place where kids aren't trying to get out of school,
Mm.
then it's just weird. It's not funny.
Yeah.
And so stuff like that, like that's what you have to take into account. Like,
This comment makes
Yes.
me laugh. Kevin Corlett says it's public domain, so it's free for them to use. That's how it's
100%. Like all of
Nice,
the old movies
Kevin.
that they
Yep.
use are so much cheaper to
That's
license.
the perfect answer, of
Yeah.
course.
that's why they did it. That's
It's why
the
it's
truth.
Betty Boop. It's why it's
Yep.
Funny Face. Like,
I mean, the obvious answer is Hoobie Halloween.
oh no.
damn it. Hey, we got a comment.
10
here.
minutes. That's how far I got into
Yeah,
that one
comment.
back.
Stress Free K says, will this season have the typical episode where the AI takes over the ship and the crew has to stop it?
I think they don't. I don't feel like Zora is a bad entity. There might be a point where they have to set some boundaries with Zora, perhaps.
Especially she keeps talking with that sexy voice. It's going
Oh,
to
so
lots of boundaries.
Fun fact: the Annabelle Wallace is the actress who is the voice of Zora, and she, last I checked, was dating Chris Pine, so dating a Kirk.
You said
Oh.
Annabelle Wallace.
Keep
Mhm.
it in the family.
She was she played Jane Seymour in
Don't Google
The-
that,
The
Clyde.
Tutors.
I know what you're talking about.
We can see in the reflection of your glasses what's going on there. James Worm says, you take off your glasses. James Worm says, I still don't like that in 2020, watching a spacefaring show, they roll up to a planet, no satellites, no other ships, no orbital technology. To which I say, maybe they've evolved past that. Maybe they don't need to have just a bunch of space trash.
Well, Trill
So
was always
fun-
kind of depicted as, nature first,
Yeah.
environment first, and technology second, third, or fourth.
Yeah, the Trill, up until I was deep into the Trill memory alpha today, they were apparently space-fearing up until the 23rd century. So they were one of the last sort of more, quote unquote, modern species to come into space in the first place. And so I think as their society and after the burn, if they're already a fairly fearful in nature species, they're going to be like, ooh, space, not up there. No, thank you. How's it going over there, Clyde?
I mean,
No.
it's not one of those situations where you're like the voice and then you go, nope.
Hey,
Let's
See,
move
Chris
on.
Pond, I see you.
WYSIWYG wanted to know potentially the Federation's on Corvan 2. Corbin 2? I don't know what that is. What's Corvan 2?
That's a good
So-
question.
Is that one we gotta look up?
Yeah. Oh, wait, is it from Lower Decks?
Is it?
Mm.
No,
It was mentioned
Um,
on Lower Decks.
we'll have to research this one. We'll get back to you.
Yeah,
It's got
Discovery.
rainforest.
Oh, it's the mining colony where they would mine dilithium.
Oh, that would be interesting if the Federation caused the burn, right?
Oh.
It would make sense that they would be there trying to look for more dilithium, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or perhaps the call is coming from within the house. You know, we've had inside. You've never heard that phrase? The call coming from inside the house?
But this is not a scary movie, but go ahead.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
scary. It would be, like basically people in the Federation who didn't like the direction of the Federation, who then sabotaged the Federation and caused the burns, because we've seen that in other Trek movies before. So it's definitely something they've looked at and used. So that could be interesting.
CJ says, no, it's on Risa.
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 Risa is the pleasure planet.
Lamo says, I put something in the comments earlier. Okay. Anyway, the question is, do you think that that little chunk of dilithium that Tilly got from Poe is going to have significance? Chekhov's dilithium?
I mean, perhaps, but there is a ton of dilithium on the ship, so
Yeah.
lots and lots. But if it's a specific kind of dilithium, perhaps, because maybe Poe altered but it could be like, what if that piece of dilithium is closer to the kind of dilithium they were using because they all had access to recrystallizers because of Poe, and so perhaps it's like changing something in the dilithium when it's recrystallizing.
Guys, I just remembered Poe's dead. That's sad.
Man, I mean, we don't know. What if her species lives like a super long time?
Yeah.
Or what if she also found a Red Angel suit and just jumped up into the future, man?
You never
If
know.
anybody could do it, it'd be Poe.
Yeah.
She's very smart.
All right. I think this is a good point to wrap up while we ponder whether Poe is
Dead.
alive again. I was going to try and alliterate, but I was like,
Just
potable?
in heaven eating some ammonia.
Potable.
Anybody got a haiku before we leave? Anybody? Haikus?
I'm really bad at the haikuing.
I'm out.
We are done with Trek. Next week, we will return and talk. But today, bye-bye.
Elegant.
Nice job there, Grant.
Elegant.
Put it on a shirt, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on the pod this week. Remember, you can find us live on YouTube and more every Thursday night, talking Trek at 9:00 p.m. Central Standard Time Zone. Mariah, can you remind them about other stuff?
Yeah, so make sure you have subscribed if you're here on YouTube or on any of the other live streaming platforms. You can hit that subscribe button and a notification option so you know when we're going live. Also, please make sure on the audio channels that you rate and review us, specifically on Apple Podcasts. You can find links to where you can listen to and or watch the show at StarTrekPod.co.
Mike, what's this Patreon thing I've been hearing about?
Patreon.com/Star Trek Pod. That's where you can support the pod directly so we can continue doing weekly content, doing bonus content, and just taking the time to dive into Trek every week for you guys. So if you go to patreon.com/Star Trek Pod, you can make a $2 an episode donation. Usually ends up being $6 to $8 a month. And not only do you support this pod, you also get invited to our private Slack group. Tons of channels in our Slack group in which you can hang out all day with us, hang out all day with tons of positive, non-gatekeeping, diverse Star Trek fans who love to talk about not just Discovery, but all of Trek. We do watch-alongs almost every night of classic Trek episodes, and there was a great election channel that popped up this week that was very therapeutic for a number of us. So thank you for that, guys. And it's just a great supportive community, and you also get bonus podcasts. Like Mariah said, we're gonna dive more into Trill history, specifically with Jadzia Dax in our next bonus podcast episode that you can only get on Patreon. We reviewed most of the Star Trek movies on Patreon, and we just do a lot of fun bonus stuff for Star Trek fans at patreon.com/Star Trek Pod.
Do it.
Now, Clyde, my understanding is that there's nowhere for anyone to follow us. Am I wrong?
I mean, hey, if you're on Twitter, follow us. Tweet about the show. If you're on IG, you know what to do. let people know on IG that you watch and follow the show. And you can follow us both at Star Trek Pod. So tweet, retweet. But as always, I want to shout out a couple people who hold us down. Karen, who runs our Twitter. James Worm, what's up, James? Saw you in chat. Who helps out on our Insta. Show him some love. Everybody in the chat, say what's up to James.
A round of applause.
And like JC is saying, shout out to our number one fan, Stacey Abrams.
She loves Star Trek so much. If you subscribed and did they did like a Trekkies for Biden and Harris thing, she did this like quiz part and got like every answer right. She is an ultimate Trek nerd, and she loves New Trek because she knows all the cool kids love New Trek.
Hey, speaking of cool kids loving Trek, AOC dropped a Tuvix reference on Twitter this week. So hell yeah.
I don't
That's
know
a
who
deep
Tuvix
cut.
is.
That's a deep cut.
Is that the weird looking chef dude?
Looks like we got an episode of Voyager to watch
No.
with Grant on Patreon.
Please, no. I don't want to do
What
it.
do you say, guys?
We
Let's
should
do
do favorite Trek episodes from some of our favorite politicians.
Yeah.
I
Let's do that.
An
You
inquiry.
guys, quit giving me more homework. Hey, where can Mike? Where can people follow you?
Follow me at Mike Moody Garcia on Twitter and Insta. And remember, please download the audio version of this podcast. We need those download numbers.
Oh yes, Mariah.
I'm at Mariah Gossett on all platforms. That's Mariah with a Y and a Gossett with 2 S's and 2 T's.
Clyde. Oh, you nailed it this
Got
time.
it this time. You can find me at Clyde Haynes on Twitter or keyandclyde.com on the web. That's KEI and Clyde.com.
You can follow me at Baron Von Grant, and you can also go ahead and start packing your bags and move over to Georgia because there's going to be a special election in December. And if you move there and you can just change your residency there and vote, that'd be awesome. Anyway, we love y'all. We will be back next week to talk more Star Trek Discovery. And until then, live long and make that money.